Hi everyone, my name is May from Propertia Bali, and here I am at Bali Solve, which is a business and visa consulting company. So here I am with Dodo.
Yes.
He is the expert for giving you advices on tax and visas. If you are interested to stay in Bali, he's the guy to see. Hi Dodo, nice to meet you. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, please?
Well, I am, my name is Dodo. Dodo is the long, almost like the president, but I'm not the president of the country, of course.
Not yet.
Not yet. And I'm also not planning to run. But yeah, and I run multiple businesses, mostly in restaurant business, some property business as well. And I have been in setting up my own company and running entrepreneurial businesses since I was, 28 years old. So now I'm almost 50. So I got about 20 over years of real life practice. Most consultants who are existing today, they probably did not run business and before, but they probably studied by the book. But I have gone through up and down, being investigated by tax, being, corrected by the tax officers, being, basically called in left and right, so from there we learn a lot and we fix what we have done wrong so that it does not happen again to other people as well.
That's great, because we have a lot of questions that we encounter every day with our clients from overseas, and this question is very relatable. So one of the question is the most basic one is how to set up PT and PMA. So how do you set it up? What's the process?
Let's go into what is a PT PMA.
Yeah.
PT PMA in Bahasa Indonesia means Perseroan Terbatas Penanaman Modal Asing, which means limited liability company owned by foreigners.
Yeah.
Okay, and it is the same exact, benefit as the local PT. The only difference between a local PT and a PT PMA is the ownership. For example, a local company requires 2 shareholders. A PT PMA also requires 2 shareholders. 2 foreigners can get together and form a limited liability company, but it requires at least 2 people or 2 entities. Okay, it can be a combination of, for example, somebody have a company in Hong Kong, or somebody have a company in Singapore, or somebody have a company in Dubai. They can actually come in, own a certain percentage of the company, the PT PMA, with the holding that they have in Dubai or in Hong Kong, and they can also choose to use their personal name as one of the partner. So, but you can also have 2 individuals who come into this country and they would like to stay here. They can set up a PT PMA using their name, owning anything with any kind of percentages they have agreed with each other.
Okay.
So another thing is that, let's say there's a local person who set up a PT local, and then there's a foreigner who comes in and say, hey, I want to invest in your company. The minute that foreigners come into a local company, it will convert the local company into a PT PMA.
How much does it cost to create PT PMA? I heard it's very expensive for one person to apply PT PMA.
Well, how much? I think your question is that what is the capitalizations of a PT PMA? A PT PMA requires 10 billion in capitalization. This is the difference between a local company versus a foreign-owned company. A foreign-owned company must have at least 10 billion in injected capital and base capital.
Wow.
Okay. From there on, we ask the shareholders, do you want to obtain a residency permit? Okay. What kind of residency permit do you want to get? If they do not have 10 billion per person, then they would have to obtain a working visa under the new rules, okay, to be able to stay and acting as a director. But if somebody have a big investment or big capitalization, such as, for example, 10 billion per person, that person can, become the shareholders of the company and at the same time also become the director without obtaining what we call as RPTKA or IMTA, to work. Okay?
RPTKA?
RPTKA is the plans to use foreign workers in a company. So for example, Indonesian company can sponsor foreigners to work before they can legally employ this particular person. We have to submit an application to the Department of Labor, and that is submitted in the format of RPTKA. And the Labor Department will review the RPTKA and decide to or not decide to approve the applications. Okay.
Is it necessary to have PMA when you want to open up like a rental business here? Is it necessary?
For foreigners, we always advise anybody who come to us, if they are planning to make money, if they are planning to earn income in this country, the safest way to do it is by creating a limited liability company. As you know, whenever you are renting out your property, legally the owner of the property must pay income tax. So when you do not have income tax ID number, right, you will be paying a much higher tax, such as 20%, versus when you have a tax ID, you pay 10%. So, but if you are planning to rent out your property on Airbnb, you need to apply local municipal tax. So there are two kinds of lease, which is a rental methods. In this case, you can rent your property on daily basis or weekly basis or monthly basis. And the second one is that you can rent your property for annual basis. For example, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, or 30 years. Right? So when you do the first method, doing short-term rental, you need to set up a company, and your company needs to go to the municipality. And you need to obtain local tax ID. Okay? Once you obtain local tax ID, you can begin to collect 10% city tax. Every single time your customers come in to stay at your villa, you will then collect the 10% on behalf of the government, local government, and then pays it to the local government on monthly basis. Okay? And if you do yearly rental, your income tax is final 10% being collected or being paid by you. You're not collecting anymore because it is income tax. So whatever you received, you need to pay 10% to the government. And it depends on your counterparty as well. Who is your counterparty? If your counterparty is actually a company, then the 10% income tax must be withheld by the other company. But if you are dealing with person by person, then it is the obligation of the person who received the money to pay that 10% tax.
Okay. Interesting. And also this is a lot of question from our clients as well. It's regarding tax identification number. It's how do you acquire that when you're a foreigner? And then what if you don't have PTPMA? What if you just only have KITAS?
Now, for tax identification ID, it is given to people who are considered as a resident in this country. There has been some debatable issues. There are some people who said, if you are here for 183 days, you are liable to become, Indonesian taxpayer. But the rules from immigration's point of view is that anybody who come in with B211A or D211 or D212 visit visa is not considered as a resident. Even if you stay above 183 days, you won't be able to obtain a tax ID.
So it's a bit tricky.
It is not tricky. It is regulations from immigrations, right? So that's why when people come into this country and they are visiting and they do not have quote-unquote KITAS or the residency permit, limited stay permit, they are not subject to Indonesian tax liability.
Yeah.
Because they could never get a tax ID.
Yeah.
Right? They could never get a tax ID. How could they pay?
Yeah.
So in order for somebody to be able to obtain Indonesian tax ID, they would first need to become a resident. Okay? They need to become a resident, and there are many ways someone can obtain residency here.
Yeah.
Very simple example. If you marry, are you single or are you married?
Not yet.
Okay. Let's say if you found a handsome, foreigner,
Yes.
From, European countries or whichever country, and then you decided to marry this guy.
Yeah.
Okay. You can become the sponsor.
Yeah.
Okay. And this individuals, your husband or your future husband, will then be able to obtain residency permit, and that residency permit would then allow him to go to the tax office
Yeah.
and obtain tax ID.
Okay.
And the second way is that if somebody obtain a job, they came into this country, they become a chef, and a certain company sponsor their visa,
Yeah.
and they obtain that residency permit, they can go to tax office and gain their tax ID and pay their tax,
Yeah.
or report their individual tax.
Yeah.
The third method is when somebody comes in and they form a company. When they form a company, if their shares within the company is more than 10 billion or 10 billion at least, they can obtain investment visa.
Yeah.
So with that investment visa, he can go to the tax office and obtain tax ID. So anybody who have kitas will be able to apply for a tax ID.
Okay. So, there is a case where it's like I'm a foreigner who's not in Bali, but I do have a property here. So, like, what is the visa permits in that? Like, is there any permits that I need to obtain, or is there any legal or taxes that I need to pay?
So if you're a foreigner living overseas, but you have an investment that you're making here,
Yeah.
How to make it legal,
Yeah.
right? Now, any foreigners who live overseas, they oftentimes do not see the necessity of having a proper permit because they are not breaching immigration rules.
Yeah.
But there are a couple disadvantages if they decide to go in with their personal name.
Yeah.
When a foreigner come in directly and rent directly using their personal name, they do not have a tax ID.
Yeah.
Most likely they will be renting it illegally by doing Airbnb themselves, and they're probably gonna hire somebody here, and all the expenses they have spent is not deductible. It's not tax deductible.
Yeah.
And when they bring that income, for example, to a country like America, if they live in America, when that money reaches American bank account, they would have to deal with their taxation there. So, for example, if they receive $100,000 a year from the rental,
Yeah.
and they have not yet paid for the tax here, then they would have to deal with the American government, who would probably tax them at a much higher rate,
Yeah.
maybe 35% or more.
That's really high.
And if the person is living overseas and they want to do it properly, what they can do, there's quite a few options. Option number one, they can still set up a company,
Yeah.
but because they're not here, they need to assign a local director.
Okay.
So the local director could act on their behalf to go to the bank, to process tax documentation, signing all lease agreement, and that local director will be acting on his or her behalf.
Yeah.
And the investor who are living overseas, like we have mentioned in the first questions, can always own the company using their holding in Dubai or in Hong Kong. Before any investor begin to do this, they need to double check the tax treaty. The lowest dividend tax is for a company that is located in Hong Kong. So if Indonesian company make profit and distribute the dividend to Hong Kong company, the dividend tax is 5%. Okay, versus if you have a Cyprus company that do not have tax treaty with Indonesian government, any dividend that is being distributed by Indonesian company that is owned by a Cyprus company, when the money is moving offshore back to the Cyprus company will be taxed at 20%.
Higher.
There are, information that we can find out online to see if a certain country is having tax treaty or not. End of the day, everything become computerized and artificial intelligence is taking over the tax analysis, tax system, and we are moving towards that. In 2024, Indonesian government begin to connect a lot of the digital data from individual KTP or national identity. It has a certain NIK number. Every single time somebody receives a salary, even if that person do not have a tax ID, that NIK will be inputted into the company's expense sheets, right?
Yeah.
And once that is being inputted, tax department can access. Tax department can nowadays just sit down in their office and check out somebody's bank account without obtaining any legal letters. As the world begin to move closer and closer and tighter to prevent people from laundering money and from people not paying their taxes, I think the future is looking quite serious. So my advice for people who are interested to make investment, do it properly, do it legally, do the research, try to understand what kind of tax you could save, or what is your best tax scheme. End of the day, money that is coming unclean to you, unclean meaning with no tax being paid, you could not use that money to purchase anything. If I today have undeclared income and I purchase a luxurious car, right? The tax department will send me a letter inquiring where do I get that money from. If I buy an asset and they see that the asset is very expensive, yet I actually don't have the money based on my tax filing, they could also ask questions about where is this money coming from. So as the world begin to consolidate with different kind of tax treaty, openness, for example, foreigners who come into Indonesia to open up bank account, Indonesian bank will open the bank account, but they will always ask them, what is your tax ID? What is the British tax ID that you have? Or what is your American tax ID? They will always require you to provide those informations.
So at the end, you need like someone here to make it legal, essentially, right?
Well,
if you are like
if you're out of Indonesia, and at some point in time you plan to keep on investing, your return of investment is good and become significant, the best way to do it is to do it properly. Don't use your personal name, because when you use your personal name, you cannot obtain tax ID, and then your tax either gonna be taxed at 20% straightforward, and you cannot deduct any expenses that has been spent on the property. Okay? And if you're foreigners who come into Indonesia and live here, and then you do it illegally, when your contract or lease agreement fall into the hand of the authority, punishments such as deportations, such as not being allowed to return back to this country, is a very high risk that you're taking.
Wow, okay. So what is like the recent update regarding on buying property in Bali as a foreigner investor?
There are many ways of buying property. A lot of people refers buying property as leasing. So they're actually leasing the land for 30 years or 35 years or 25 years. To some people, they refer that as buying. But for me, buying means you buy a piece of land and you own it, and you have the ownership, the total ownership of the land. You would never need to renew the lease anymore. Okay, let's talk about the leasehold agreement first. Can I go back to your question again? When you asked me the question about the purchase, right?
Yes.
What kind of tax is it involved, you said?
Yeah, what kind of like tax involved? Like, what is the
Okay.
process as well?
Okay, so if a foreigner comes into this country and they purchase or lease a piece of property, it depends on what is the purpose of
Yeah.
their, investment,
Yeah.
or what is the purpose that they lease the property.
Yeah.
If they lease the property because they wanted to stay,
Mm-hmm.
and they will never rent it out at any point in time.
Yeah.
They will only be like using it for personal purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Then the income tax does not need to be withheld by the foreigner. Okay? Then the owner of the property will need to pay for the income tax themselves equal to 10%.
Yeah.
So if the foreigner comes in and rent the property for, let's say, 30 years and it costs him $100,000,
Yeah.
it is the duty of the local landowner to pay for the tax.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but this is Indonesia where a lot of people are trying to avoid taxes.
Yes.
So they will say, "Oh, boss, can we lower down the valuations?"
Yeah.
Right? I mean, normally the foreigner doesn't really care because he's not using that property for him to do business.
Yeah.
So he will agree to the landlord so the landlord can save 50% tax, right? Or 70% tax.
Yes.
Or whatever the number they decided
I think
to
it's
play
like,
around with.
I think it's 99%.
Well, the thing is, if you are a company
Yeah.
and you're planning to make money using that property to earn income,
Yeah.
and when you set up your company, you make a commitment with Indonesian government that you will be bringing in 10 billion investment minimum.
Yeah.
So when you send in that money from Europe or from America to come into Indonesian bank account, Indonesian government owns anything between 0.5% all the way to 11%
Yeah.
of every single penny that you spend. So for example, you set up a company and you send your money in, that money is now in your bank account. As a matter of fact, this does not apply only to a PTPMA.
Yeah.
This applies to
Pretty-
everybody who lives in Indonesia. The government owns
11.
some of our money.
Yeah.
But the minute we spend it, let's say I go to a coffee shop and I go to Woods or Red Gunpowder to buy a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
At the end of the bill, you will see 10% tax.
Yeah.
The government have a certain stake
Yeah.
in every single bank account
Yeah.
that existed. Okay, but with PTPMA, it is a little bit more strict. Okay, because in order for you to be able to expense the money that you spend, a certain taxes proof and receipt need to be presented.
Yeah.
So, let's say a PTPMA purchased a piece of land and they paid $100,000. In order for that $100,000 to be properly recorded on the company or in the company balance sheets on the asset side as prepaid rental for 30 years, the company director, upon tax investigations, must provide the receipt of 10% tax payment. If the company agreed to play around with the landowner and agree on 50%,
Yeah.
the tax receipt will only says 50,000. Okay, and therefore you have a gap where your cash is actually reduced by 100,000, but your tax receipt it's only 50,000.
Yeah.
Okay, you can only deduct or amortize expenses over the course of 30 years, not based on 100,000, but only based on 50,000.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that is basically how the Indonesian tax system work. There's a lot of withholding taxes, and if you're renting using a company, your company then
Yeah.
is required to withhold that. Okay, your company before paying the taxes to or paying the rental to the landowner, the company must withhold.
Yeah.
keep it in the company account and then make the payment directly to the government.
So what are the common mistakes for foreigner investors starting investment in Bali?
The most common mistake that I've seen so far for foreign investor who comes in to invest in Bali, for sure, if they're planning to make money and earn income, a lot of people make mistake by using their personal name. When you use your name to rent property and then begin to make money, you're breaking immigration rules. Yeah. So immigrations will oftentimes come even when somebody posted on Facebook, for example, somebody who came to visit on visa B211A or a VOA visa, and they have rented a room for 2 months and they have an extra room and they wanted to get rid of it. Okay, they want to find a roommate. So they go on Facebook and they try to post that on Facebook. Immediately, within 24 hours, immigration will show up and they will be taken in for questions, and oftentimes it will either result in a warning or it will result in deportation. And especially if you are planning to make investment here, try to always avoid using your personal name.
So whose name that?
They should use a company name to own the property if you plan to do business. Okay. Second mistake that I often see is that when your company coming in to make investment, oftentimes people did not do proper due diligence. They go in, they rent a property, and after 1 year, somebody knocking at their door and said, "Oh, you owe me money or you have to get out because you don't have the rights." They did not do the proper due diligence. They did not really rent it directly from the landowner. They might have rented from somebody else who only have 1 year left on the property, and therefore they transfer a much bigger amount to somebody who doesn't really have the rights. And then therefore the landowner will come in and they will evict them. Okay. One of the recent case that I've seen so far, 2 people, for both foreigners, both are renting their property, and one is renting, the other one is renting out. They did not properly do a good contract. So that the contract is open to interpretations of many kind of interpretations. So for example, if I read the contract, I will say, "Oh yeah, he's valid," and the other person, upon reading it, also say, "Oh yeah, he failed to fulfill his promise." But always use a notary when you are coming in to this country, and if you want to rent a property, if you want to do a proper due diligence, you should find some legal consultation before you proceed. In the due diligence process, many things will be done, such as checking for the zoning of the land, whether it's green, yellow, or purple. A green zone means you cannot build on it. Yellow zone means it's residential. Purple zone means it's accommodation tourism. And within those zoning, you also have different kind of coefficients, building ratio, right? So how many percent of those building land can you build? Is it 40% or is it 50% or is it 20%? So all this kind of due diligence you must do before you begin to take on a property. What is an under-table agreement? Under-table agreement is an agreement that is being made between 2 people. You and I get together, we agreed on something, we wrote it down on a piece of paper, and then we signed it. And then I pay you the money. This is called under-table agreement. There is no witness, there is no clarification of who paid the tax, etc. It's done purely by 2 people who agreed, and there's a proof of payment. And normally this kind of agreement is the weakest amongst all. For example, if you and I sign an under-table agreement for 30 years, and later on if I want to sublease this property to somebody else, and if that person use notary, this contract is not usable. Nobody's gonna accept an under-table agreement. And secondly, there's a contract that is legalized and there's a contract that is warmake. Both of them is almost the same, in which the contract is made by the two people, but then they go find a notary to legalize or warmake this contract. The notary is not really responsible for the content, but the notary is only saying, hey, this transaction is legal, meaning I have witnessed this transaction. Yes, true, there's a transaction as such. The third one, which is the strongest, which is the notarized agreement. The notarized agreement have a standard format template, even though it differs from notary to notary, but it is very standard, meaning it has who is the first party, what is the object being rented, how many years it is being rented, what is the term of payment, what if the payment fails, you know, all these kind of little details are put in. What if there's any future dispute? What if there is a force majeure? All these details are being put in, and the letter is drafted by a notary. Okay. Once this is signed, it is binding. Okay. In many instances, people don't really proceed further than this. People just stop at the notary level. But if you really want to secure and want to make this lease agreement bulletproof, you need to go registered with the land department as well. Okay, so what you would do is that you would say to the landlord to say, hey, upon leasing this land, I would like to register this lease agreement in the notary through the BPN. Okay, so you will pay an extra cost, but then within the land certificate, anybody who see the land certificate since the day you rent it, it will say there is rental agreement, deeds number 16, dated on which date, and then therefore anybody who purchased this land or purchased this certificate while it's being rented will know that their claim come second. Okay? Even though you don't register it, normally when people buy the property that has been built, they will come and visit. So this kind of occurrence rarely happens. But if the land has been empty, for example, I lease a piece of land that is far away, you know, from where I live, and I lease it for 30 years, and then I don't check the land. I didn't go visit the land for many years. I never built anything on it. The owner has possibility of re-renting that land to somebody else. I mean, is that against the law? Yes, the owner can go to jail, but that could have happened if, for example, you know, the land was never built, right? And then somebody came and said, oh, can I rent the land? And the owner thinks, oh, this land will never be built anyway. So he could probably rent it again because it is not registered with the land department. There's no way of checking it. Another common mistake that is made by most foreigners is not understanding the tax regulations. Okay, they do not understand when they come into this country, there's a lot of withholding taxes. Okay, when you rent a property or a piece of land from somebody, the foreigner must withhold tax 10%. That is Article 4, verse 2, okay, of the tax code. If they hire a construction company, they need to understand their counterparty tax identity or tax status. Are they a small, medium, or big size company? Because the tax withholding and the tax rate is different. So for example, on the new regulations, if I'm not mistaken, PP9 2022, it talks about the construction tax withholding. So there are three types of services that a company can be involved in when they are providing a construction work. Number one is construction services. Construction services, that individuals or that company is coming in to give assessment. They give consultations before a building is being constructed. They look at the topography of the land. They look at, you know, how to construct, how to give advice so that the company, so that the building can be properly, you know, built during the construction phases. I mean, this kind of tax goes from 3% to 6%, depends on how big is the company, whether they do have a certification license or not.
Yeah.
If a company have a certification license, which is called SKA, then the tax will be 3%. If the company do not have SKA, then it will be 6%.
Yeah.
Now, there is also the type of work that is called constructions, right? The actual construction itself. Could be a job of demolitions, a job of building from scratch, from land clearing all the way to building a house. Now that rate of tax varied from 2% to 4%.
Yeah.
If the company has a license certifications, then the tax is 2%. And if the company do not have certification, it will be 4%.
It's higher.
Right. And then there's the third service, which is called the integrated one, where they actually do the assessment from the start, preparing the analytic, and assisting from advising how to build, and then do a full-scale integrated until the building is done.
Yeah.
The tax rate goes from 1.65 into 4%.
All of this is like in one, like.
All of this is, this is Indonesian tax code that foreigners must spend time to try to understand.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these withholding taxes are not so common overseas.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah.
Where can the foreigners get this all information? Is it like?
I mean, normally you would go to a tax specialist and ask them to explain what kind of tax, if I'm doing what kind of activities, so that you are clear before you proceed.
Yeah, because I believe it's so hard to have very complete information regarding the taxes online, especially in Bahasa Indonesia as well. There is so different type of taxes.
I mean, throughout my practice of assisting people, consulting, and even for my personal business, I have encountered quite a few different advice.
Yeah.
So the key is to find a few good consultants, and then you ask opinion among a few of them. And if you want to go directly to the tax department, I would advise you not to ask questions through chat or automated service. I would advise you to bring your lease agreement. I would advise you to bring the draft at least, and then go sit down, with, the tax officers, and, lay it out before them, and then you will understand.
How can I legally rent out my villa as a foreign investors? And as far we understand, short rental is only allowed to Indonesians, and only if they have pondok wisata. So how do all your clients rent out their property legally? Even with a PMA, it will not be possible because a PMA cannot also have pondok wisata. So how can we try and make it illegal?
PMA could choose real estate license, which is 68111, and I can read it for you. Owned or rental real estate.
Yeah.
This group includes the business of buying, selling, renting, and operating real estate, both own and lease, such as apartment buildings, residential building, and non-residential buildings such as storage, warehouse, facility, malls, shopping center, and others, as well as the provisions of houses and flats or apartment with or without furnitures for payment use, either monthly or yearly.
Yeah.
Okay, so based on this KBLI, a foreign company or PTPMA is allowed to rent out their, to be in the business of buying and selling, renting, and leasing.
Yeah.
And there's another KBLI, which is 55900, which is provisions of other accommodations. This group including the business of providing lodging services for long period of time, including efforts to provide accommodation for longer or temporary periods, either single rooms or shared rooms or dormitories for student or for seasonal workers and the like. Okay, so there are these two KBLI that we suggest to our clients to use, and once a company is established, the company we'll then open up bank account, and then the company will also once own a certain kind of lease. We can bring the lease agreement to municipality and ask the municipal government to issue the local tax ID so that the business can collect 10% municipal tax and pay it properly. And once we submit the applications to the municipality will schedule a site visit. They will come to your property, they will check your property, and then after that they will issue you the local municipality tax ID, and you can be legit then.
Oh, okay. So there's a lot of process in that, like from the checking, from setting up the PMA and so on.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's not that difficult. It's a quick process. We can set up a company within 1 week, and then we can, assist people to get their residency permit. But due to regulation changes, we are expecting a new set of rules coming in January next year. So where there's gonna be a lot of indexes for new stay permit and limited stay permit. Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of them coming out soon. And we'll talk again then. We'll get you up to date and posted on the latest development.
And be like, hey, this is an update on January 2024 regarding on the tax. But thank you so much, Dodo, for educating me regarding the legal and taxes in Indonesia. So yeah, if you guys want to watch more of this kind of content, please subscribe and follow us. And if you want to know more about tax and visa permits, you can go directly to balisolve.com. So yeah, thank you. See you next time.
See you next time.